Okay, so I was filming some B-roll, just filming the clouds because it's kind of a cool day. Um, and I noticed something interesting in my camera settings. So when I went in, there was a feature. I went to set up a time lapse, which I've never done before, but I go to set up the time lapse, and there's this detail sharpening feature that I think for the most part was usually grayed out, but now it was actually highlighted and I could select it. And there was three levels of sharpening, and I was very curious because I was like, I've never seen this, I've never heard of this, I've never seen anyone test it before. So that's what we're gonna do today. Okay, so I've brought the footage into DaVinci and I've applied just a light color grade to it. Nothing too crazy. There's no noise reduction, no sharpening. It is literally just a little bit of an exposure adjustment, contrast, and saturation. That is all that's done to these images. This is the first image, and from left to right, we're going to go in order of no sharpening to a lot of sharpening, and then I'm going to switch to the close-up shots where we're going to do a side-by-side comparison. So first up, we have the shot with no sharpening, and it looks good. It looks exactly how I've expected this footage to look, how it's always looked. I'm going to zoom in on these because the only way of really being able to see any difference is just zooming in a lot. So now if we go up to level 1, there should be slight sharpening to this, but not expecting too much. And really, I didn't notice anything at all. So not really sure, how much is actually going on here. We bump it up to level 2. And once again, it was kind of the same thing where I saw looks about the same. We go up to the highest level of sharpening, and maybe if I squint hard enough and I look at the image for long enough, I can tell that it's slightly sharpened. But just at a first initial glance, I don't see anything. I don't see any real noticeable difference between this image and this image. There's maybe a slight difference. I think I can see a slight difference. But that that difference in sharpness that I'm seeing could be due to just the focus being a little bit off, like a little bit more off. It doesn't seem like it's that crazy. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the sharpening isn't meant to be super strong. It's just meant to be a subtle little boost. But I don't really feel like I'm seeing it very much. So again, we can punch in here just really far. Looking at my hair, it's got some texture to it, and then the brim of the glasses, maybe my skin, and then again, okay. I don't know. I'm not noticing anything personally. Let's look at the close-ups, which I did already put side by side. So go back a frame. There we go. All right. So these are the close-up images, and we're going to go, again, left is no sharpening, the middle one is level 1, and the far side is level 3. Once again, I'm not really noticing that much difference. I can maybe see if I zoom in and look at like my forehead here, maybe there's a little bit more sharpening. Some of these hairs here look a little bit fuzzier than the hairs here. I think it's a little bit cleaner on my skin and on my lips than here, but that could also just be because of the face that I'm making here and not the actual sharpening. But again, I'm looking at this. I'm punching in like crazy to try and find the actual difference, and it's very minor what I'm seeing. I do think the exposure on this first shot was a little bit different than the third one, so that does play a little bit of a factor, but I really don't see enough of a difference to justify having this setting turned on. Now, if we look at the noise levels, this is one thing I did kind of see, was that it looked like when the sharpening was turned on, there was actually more noise in the image, because what I assume it's doing is just digitally sharpening the image, but unlike a Sony camera, there's not a lot of that denoising that's going on in the camera. Blackmagic, a lot of the time, just kind of gives you the flat image, as little processing as possible, which for me personally, I do really like because it gives me more control. but it does typically mean that there's more noise. And I really don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but, you know, we can kind of see the noise in here, and the noise in here, and then the noise in here. It just looks a little bit cleaner. Just a little bit cleaner. And again, in a shot like this, when you zoom out to a reasonable, you know, point, you're not going to notice. I think what's going on, and this is just a theory, but again, it's digitally sharpening the image, so I think it's making the noise more prominent. It's not adding noise, it's just sharpening the noise, which makes it more clear, and therefore you see it more. But again, because, like, if I was seeing a noticeable difference in sharpness on my face, and maybe there was added sharpness to the noise, okay, that makes sense, you know, kind of a give and take there, but I don't see enough sharpening going on here to really warrant that. What I do want to test, though, is the low light, because in low light we'll have more noise, and therefore I can see if definitively the sharpening is just doing a broad sharpening, and it's actually increasing the amount of noise, or increasing the clarity of the noise, more than it's actually sharpening the highlights and the main parts of the image. One little trick I've found that helps when you're filming by yourself is to, if you have a pole or a extra light stand like I do, you should kind of set it to your height. And I like to use a hat. Take the hat, put it over. There you go, you got a body double. Okay, so I have brought the footage back into DaVinci, applied just a light color grade, and I'm pretty sure my hypothesis was correct, but I also noticed something very interesting. So, this first shot right here, this has no detail sharpening to it. This is just the basic look. But this shot has detail sharpening. Now, first off, the first thing I notice is the noise difference. Clearly, the noise is much more prominent in this image, and it even shows on the scopes down here if you look at this. So if you look at this image, there's just more detail down here at the bottom, and it's just a lot cleaner. Whereas this, there's just a lot more noise, and if we just punch in here, this will just show us. We look at the wall right here. I mean, it's pretty bad. But there was also another thing that I noticed that was weird. I don't know if this might be a DaVinci thing. I'm not entirely sure. It might go away when I export the footage, but you can kind of see this. There's some weird, like, not artifacting, but as we look at the image with no detail sharpening, look at my shoulder, it looks completely normal. But this image, there's some weird artifacting, or I don't even know what you'd call it, but something going on with some of the detail on my jacket here. It's hard to see, but if we zoom in, this kind of yellow and bluish stuff right here, it just looks kind of weird. And when we zoom out here, this is where it starts to like pop. And there's, I don't know, I think it's again, it's that digital sharpening that's trying to sharpen up this part of the image, but it's introducing some weird artifacting to this texture, and I don't know why that is. This, once again, you kind of see the same thing, where it's just, this is without the noise reduction, or without the detail sharpening, this is with. And then if we look, I did take some other ones, but it kind of just shows the same thing. And again, it's just very little detail gained, and then you get a lot of noise, and it's just not great. It doesn't look good, and I don't think it's really a feature that you really should use. To be honest, I was curious about it, so I tested it out, but I don't think I will ever use this feature. One thing I did do is I looked up anything I could find on this detail sharpening thing, because I'd never heard anything about it, and I realized a couple things. So first off, it only works when you're shooting in ProRes. When you're shooting in B-RAW, it's not even an option. And that's why I've never noticed it before, because the majority of my stuff I've shot in B-raw and not ProRes. But now that I'm doing YouTube stuff and I'm filming stuff more often, I've switched to ProRes. That way I can save on storage and space, and it just makes my whole life a lot easier. And so that was why I never noticed it. And then 2, nobody's talking about it. Like literally nobody. I could find a very few things talking about it, and most people are just like kind of come to the same conclusion that I did. It's just not worth it. Just sharpen the image in post. It's a lot better that way, and it will look way better. It'll just look way better, and then you're not baked into it. So if it's overly sharpened, you know, you can adjust it in post. You can dial in the sharpness. Whereas if you sharpen it in the camera, that's just in your footage. That's just ingrained in your footage, and there's nothing you can do about that. So, final verdict: don't use this feature. It's not worth it. First off, it only works in ProRes. It doesn't work in B-raw. The sharpening doesn't look great. Just stay away from this feature. It's not worth it. If you're curious about it, now you know. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.